I was recently reading a study relative to representation in protagonists within the AAPI community. It's actually really abysmal. It gets even worse when you start looking at like South Asian, and again, because you can break up the Asian diaspora into so many different pieces, you realize that it is actually pretty marked relative to the inequity in representation within kind of positive role models in gaming. So I think that's something that, again, gaming companies and brands really are starting to take into account. And one of the things that, we feel really strongly about, because we can't always control the games themselves, is like how we portray the audience themselves as it actually comes into like advertising and the advertising space, and ensuring that we are being as representative as possible in those spaces, understanding who plays your game, and really getting into like deeper consumer behaviors and who they are, and being able to kind of play on some of the intricacies of your audience.
In the gaming work that you do, how often are you working with other Asian professionals?
It's always fortunate to be able to look around a table and see representation in the room. We are fortunate to, and again, it's not always the case, but in a lot of the current situations, to have AAPI representation at our tables. That's our clients, it's ourselves. To have that is important, but it's not a given.
Can you give a couple of examples of how that representation around the table affects gaming marketing?
I think when we are thinking about representation, it is about how we can start integrating parts of culture into the way that we talk about games and the way people can feel seen within it. I also think, again, there's always the questions around casting and all of that. And we're really fortunate to work with a brand like Google. Even with a lot of the gaming work that we've done with them historically, it's always reflected in how we do everything in front of the camera, how we do things behind the camera as well. For example, we did some work with Google Play, launching their Diablo game last year, and we actually ended up working with K-pop group aespa, and they actually were the ones who did our sort of track to it, and it got huge. We got such these voracious K-pop fans were finding this intersection with Diablo, which was really unexpected, but also super interesting. I think, again, when we think about some of the decisions that get made relative to the kinds of talent that get put in, the kinds of the openness to even an idea like having a K-pop band be a part of a gaming trailer is a good example of being able to truly kind of bring representation of all sorts to the table in a really meaningful way too. We stoked those fans in a way that I don't think that any of us really expected that a gaming trailer could really do.
Asian game developers contribute a ton in terms of really popular games in the US coming from overseas. US dev teams are far more white and are still pretty male. From a marketing standpoint, what are some of the things that could change, or you hope would change, from having an increasing number of games come from Asian developers, particularly Asian women?
I think the protagonist is a really interesting kind of isolated thing to look at, where it's being able to see the protagonist is not somebody who's being objectified, because I think Asian women historically have gotten quite objectified in particularly in these gaming spaces and these environments. It's being able to find the voice and be able to find the character and the nuance that I think a lot of our kind of male counterpoints, and specifically white male counterpoints, have been able to find that nuance and character. I think that's going to be something that's going to be hugely impactful, and something I'm really looking forward to for the way that our whole gaming landscape starts to evolve to. We've seen it time and time again, what the backlash, I think it's it's going to take it shouldn't take brave minds, but it will take people who are going to be brave to develop the kinds of games that I think people are so ready for, and again, be able to develop new kinds of narratives as well, because it's just like what we're seeing in film and everything else, where it's like finding these narratives and demonstrating these experiences in gaming will change the way that not only certain gamers see themselves, but gamers who aren't Asian or aren't women will be able to kind of interact and understand the communities that aren't just theirs.